Sahana Vavatu Sahano Bhunaktu Sahavidyan Karava Vahai Tejasvinavadhitamastu Ma Vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Chaiva Tato Jayamudirayet. Good. Welcome back. We return to our study of the Mahabharata. We're still in the Vyadha Parva. We're going to be in the Vyadha Parva for a long time because how long were the Pandavas in the Vana forest? 12 years. So, notice, by the way, Vyadha Parva, Vana Parva, Aranya Parva, Aranya Parva. All four of these words are used. And they're all correct. So, in the Aranya Parva, notice its length at 299 verses, the second longest Parva in the entire Upanishad, owing to the length of time they spent in the forest. And as we've seen in some past classes, while they're in the forest, they have this delightful stream of visitors, let us call them. They're visitors. You can imagine some of the visitors are chipmunks and squirrels and deer, but other visitors are great rishis, including the rishi Markandeya. Turns out Markandeya spent apparently quite a bit of time with them in the forest. I should have checked more carefully. Probably more than 50 chapters are dedicated to the dialogues between Markandeya and Yudhishthira and the others. We've already seen in our prior classes a dialogue between Markandeya and Yudhishthira on the topic of karma. We remember we discussed Sanchita karma, Prarabdha karma, Agami karma. So we had that discussion. And then we just finished the discussion with Markandeya and Yudhishthira about Pralaya and Srishti. And we saw that very important teaching that at the time of Pralaya, the universe does not become non-existent, but rather enters into a bija of a seed state, a resolved state, and then becomes unmanifest. Universe becomes unmanifest, then manifest. And we saw some of the importance of that in our prior class. Now, moving ahead today, we enter into, in all of the discussions between Yudhishthira and Markandeya Rishi, this section is probably the most important, at least to a student of Vedanta, because the contents of this section being a dialogue between the Vyadha and the Brahmana, this dialogue is filled with Vedantic teachings, which means Markandeya wanted to teach Vedanta to Yudhishthira and the others, and the style of teaching is what? Not just Markandeya is not going to pick up an Upanishad and start teaching Yudhishthira. Markandeya will teach by means of stories. And the story that he has chosen to teach Vedanta to Yudhishthira is the story of the Vyadha. Vyadha is a very unlikely character for our story because Vyadha means hunter, but not just hunter. Vyadha is one who supports himself by hunting. Now, in order to support yourself by hunting, there are two steps. One is you have to kill the animals. What is the second step? You have to sell the animals. Which means the Vyadha is not only a hunter, which is the direct meaning of the word, he's also, in American English, a butcher. A butcher is someone who, I don't need to describe to you, you know what a butcher does. Okay. And it turns out that in this story, by the way, goes on for a number of chapters. We're going to begin today with this introductory chapter, but then it goes on for about 8 more chapters, filled with profound Vedantic teachings. Profound Vedantic teachings taught by whom? This butcher, what an unlikely teacher of a learned Brahmana. We'll see the Brahmana in just a moment. Let's reflect on the fact that in our tradition, we generally have an image that a teacher should look a certain way, often wearing orange robes or white robes, something like that. We have this stereotypical image, sometimes a long beard, whatever it is, of what a teacher should look like. But let's admit that these images are stereotypical and wrong. Stereotypes are never correct. They're always incidental. So a teacher can look like anything. A teacher can be engaged in any kind of dharmic activity. We'll get into that in a few minutes. And we have plenty of evidence of that in our scriptures. A wonderful story of Sri Shankaracharya. There's the story of Manisha Panchakam. Some of you know the story. Sri Shankaracharya is in Benares with his disciples, and out from the shadow steps a Chandala, an outcast. Sri Shankara has just bathed. They're getting ready to do their morning rituals. They don't want to be defiled by this Chandala. It means they have to take another bath before they can do their rituals. So Shankara tells this fellow, Gacha, go, get lost. Then the Chandala proceeds to ask Shankaracharya some very interesting questions, like, the opening question is nice. The Chandala says, tell me, whom do you want to go away from whom? Do you want this body to go away from your body? Because this body is full of what? You don't think about it, but your body is full of the same stuff. Both bodies are equally impure. So the Chandala challenges Shankara. Do you want this body to go away from that body? Or do you want this Atma to go away from your Atma? Of course, Atma is one and eternally pure. And Shankara bows down before this Chandala and proceeds to be instructed. Take instruction from this Chandala. The Chandala becomes Shankara's guru. How profound is that? The message of the story is teachers come in all sizes and shapes and colors. You've already figured out that all teachers need not be born in India. You've figured that one out. So, by the way, that story, by the way, concludes with the Chandala revealing his true form. It's Lord Shiva. Anyway, that's the story. But in modern times, we have other examples of teachers, gurus, in unconditional forms. How about just prior to our lifetimes, Sri Ramakrishna? Sri Ramakrishna could not read and write. Did you know that? He was illiterate. He couldn't read or write. And yet, Swami Vivekananda, who, as a young man, he was called Narendranath, he was a brilliant college student, and Narendranath stuck to Sri Ramakrishna like anything. Narendranath recognized Sri Ramakrishna as being a wonderful guru and a guru par excellence. He did so much wonderful teachings. Also, there's about the same time, actually a little bit later, in Mumbai, there was a fellow who had On the streets they have these stalls. The typical stall you see throughout the country, where it's like an elevated. Basically, it's like an elevated box where the front opens up. So it's elevated maybe 3 feet. You sit on the floor of it, and then inside the box are all the goods. Anyway, the fellow who sat in there was selling beedies. And this beedi seller, this beedi wala, later became known as the Beedi Swami. His name was Nisarga Datta, and he was a great teacher of Vedanta, and he was widely acclaimed in Mumbai. He wrote some books, translated, I suppose, from Marathi, and he was widely accepted, and even today highly regarded as the Sri Ramakrishna, as a guru. So here we have some interesting examples of a Chandala, of a illiterate priest, Sri Ramakrishna, and of a beedi wala, who all of them were enlightened. And that really, what is it that qualifies a teacher? You know very well. What qualifies a teacher in the Upanishad, Shrotriyam and Brahmanishtam. These two qualities are given. The teacher should be Shrotriya, skilled in the scriptural tradition, and the teacher should be Brahmanishta, established in reality. These are the two requirements. Notice there's not a third requirement about what the guru should wear, what the guru should look like, what the guru should do. So here we enter into a very elaborate story in which a Vyadha, again, not just hunter, Vyadha means hunter, but how does a hunter support himself? He chops up his animals and he sells them in the marketplace. He's got a shop in the marketplace where he sells his animals. So this is the story of the Vyadha and the Brahmana. First we have to be introduced to the Brahmana. And anyway, we'll start. Today's class will be more story than teaching, so we'll go through it fairly quickly. So Markandeya proceeds to speak to Yudhishthira, and we presume that the other Pandavas and others are gathered nearby. Markandeya vacha, Markandeya kaschid dvijati vipravo, kaschid vijati vedadhyayita podhanaha, vedadhyayita tapasvi dharmashilascha, tapasvi dharma kaushiko nama bharata, kaushiko. So Markandeya begins this story to Yudhishthira and the others, and he says, Kaschit, there was someone. Who was that someone? Dvija ati pravaraha. Ati pravaraha. Someone great. Who was great? He was a Dvija, a twice-born. A great twice-born, a great Brahmana. What about this Brahmana? The Brahmana was Veda Adhyayi. He was someone who had memorized the Vedas. He was very skilled in Vedic recitation and Vedic learning. He was Tapodhanaha. Nice. Sanskrit is wonderful. Literally, one whose dhana, wealth, is tapas. You think wealth is what's in your bank account, or, excuse me, in your portfolio. So this Brahmana's wealth was not in a bank or a portfolio. This Brahmana's wealth was what? Tapas, spiritual austerities. In fact, he was tapasvi. He was a great performer of austerities. He was dharma shilaha. He was endowed with dharma. He was very dharmic. What was his name? Kaushikaha Nama. His name was Kaushika. In the story, he's simply referred to as a Brahmana. but his name was Kaushika. Bharata, Markandeya addresses Yudhishthira. O Bharata, O great one, this is the story of the Brahmana named Kaushika. What did he do? Savrikshamule kasminchid, Savrikshamule kasmin, Vedanucharayan stitah, Vedanucharayan, Uparishtacha vrikshasya, Uparishtacha Balaka sanyaliyata, Balaka sanyaliyata. Saha, that Brahmana, where was he? Vrikshamule kasminchit, Vrikshamule, at the foot of a tree, kasminchit, some tree, sitting at the foot of a tree, some tree. What was he doing? He was titaha, he was sitting there. And what was he doing? Veda anucharayan, he was reciting the Vedas. What a lovely image. This great Brahmana sitting at the foot of a tree, reciting the Vedas. All right. Uparishtacha vrikshasya, Uparishtat, up at the top, vrikshasya, of that tree, up in that tree, there was a balaka. Balaka is a crane, a big bird. I think they translate it as crane. I think cranes are the ones, they have the really big wings and long neck. I think that's the crane. Balaka is also feminine in gender. It was a female crane who was sanyaliyata. This crane, she was nested up in this tree. You see the problem? He is sitting at the foot of the tree reciting Vedas. And this big bird, not a little one, this big bird is nested up in the tree. Taya purisham utsrishtam, Taya purisham utsrishtam, Brahmanasya taropari, Brahmanasya Tamaveksha tatah krudaha, Samapadhyayata dvajaha, Samapadhyayata. Taya, by that bird, Purisham utsrishtam. Utsrishtam, released, excreted. What gets excreted? Purisham. Sounds very nice. Sanskrit is such an elegant language. Even the word for that is very elegant sounding. Purisham utsrishtam. So the bird's droppings. We'll say what happened tada, then. You see, tadopari, tada, then, upari, up on top of Brahmanasya, upon the Brahmana, those droppings, utsrishtam, were excreted. They dropped. And tataha, thereafter, our Brahmana was krudaha. He was angered. And what did he do? Tamaveksha, looking at that bird up in the tree, what did he do? Dvijaha, that twice born, that Brahmana, what did he do? He was so krudaha, he was so angered, he apadhyayata. Apadhyaya is curse. Apadhyaya is a very powerful curse, mental curse. So this Brahmana mentally cursed the bird because he was so angry. Now it's very interesting to note, before we continue with the story, that this Brahmana spent his lifetime in Vedic study and tapas, spiritual austerities. I suppose doing rituals would go along with that. You might wonder, why was that great Brahmana not able to overcome his anger? The message of the story is Vedic study and the mere performance of rituals and austerities do not in and of themselves remove anger. Anger has a source. What is the source? In fact, this here Vedanta walks in the door. What is the source of anger? If you've studied the Bhagavad Gita with us here, you understand that anger comes from kama, desire. When desire is obstructed, what do we feel? Anger. In fact, Puja Swami Tadatmananda defined anger as obstructed desire. Nice description. Obstructed desire. Where does desire come from? Now we get very Vedantic. Your true nature is Satchidananda, full and complete, or to use less technical terms, your true nature is divine. But if one has not recognized their inner divinity, if one has not recognized that their true nature is Satchidananda, what will that person feel? The person will feel limited and incomplete. Feeling limited and incomplete, what will that person experience? Kama. And when that kama gets obstructed, krodha. It's all pretty natural. If someone recognizes their inner divinity, if someone is established in that truth of their inner fullness, will they experience kama? No. And if they don't experience kama, will they have krodha? No. So what do we understand about our Brahmana is our Brahmana has anger because he has kama. He has kama because he has not discovered his true nature as Satchidananda Atma. He has not discovered that inner divinity because Vedic recitation doesn't make you enlightened. Nor does the performance of rituals make you enlightened. Nor does the performance of spiritual austerities make you enlightened. What makes you enlightened? The problem is ignorance. If the problem is ignorance, the solution is not more rituals, not more Vedic recitation. If the problem is ignorance about your true nature, the solution we call Vedanta. Vedanta is a teaching tradition that removes that particular ignorance. So this great Brahmana was very pious, no doubt, but this great Brahmana did not have the opportunity for traditional Vedantic study. Notice we differentiate between Vedic study and Vedantic study. Vedic study is what a priest would do. A priest who needs to know all the rituals and all the mantras for the sake of their work. That's the nature of this Brahmana study, as opposed to those who study not the entire Veda, but a portion of the Veda that comes at the end. Anta. That which comes at the anta of the Veda, Vedanta. The Upanishads, where the purely spiritual teachings are found. So this Brahmana was a Veda Adhyayi. He had studied the Vedas. He was not a Vedanta Adhyayi. He had not had the opportunity to study Vedanta properly. Therefore, he had ignorance. Because he had ignorance, he had kama, desire. Because he had kama, desire, he had krodha, anger. And because of his anger, he mentally cursed that bird. Just an ironic situation. Here he is, engaged in this most sacred of activities, reciting the Vedas. And then in a moment, from something so trivial as some bird poop on his shoulder, he gets so upset that he goes from chanting the Vedas in one moment to mentally cursing this bird in the very next moment. What happens next? Brisham krodha vibhutena, brisham krodha balakasa nirikshita, balakasa apadhyata cha viprena, apadhyata cha viprena. Nyapatad vasudhatale. Nyapatad sutta. Sa, in the second line, sa balaka, that bird, that crane, nirikshita, having been seen by whom? In the next line, viprena. Vipra also means Brahmana. Having been seen by that Brahmana. And what about that balaka? Krodha abhibhutena nripena. He was seen by that Brahmana, the bird. She was seen by the viprena, by the Brahmana. The Brahmana who was Krodha abhibhutena. He was overcome by his anger. And therefore that Brahmana apadhyata, the bird was mentally cursed by that Brahmana. Now, we're going to talk about this hunter in just a moment. This hunter is certainly one who kills. The hunter is one who commits himsa, harm, and does so by means of one's body. Physical himsa. But can himsa be done in non-physical ways? Well, turns out the most damaging, the most harmful weapon of a human being is probably not hands and arms, but probably your tongue. Because people can say such hurtful, damaging, horrible things. So harm can be done not only physically, kayena, but also vacha. Through our speech, harm can be done. Is there a third possibility? Harm can be done by means of our bodies, kayena. Harm can be done, vacha, by means of our speech. Harm can be done, manasa, by means of our minds as well. Now, this Brahmana, because of his spiritual austerities, he had some extra special power. When the Brahmana mentally cursed the bird, because of the Brahmana's tapas, spiritual austerities, the Brahmana's mind had some extra power, and as a result, what happened to that bird, that balaka, that bird which was seen by the Brahmana, who was overcome by anger, the bird which was apadhyata, who was cursed by the Brahmana, what happened to that bird? Nyapatat. You can figure that out with my expression. The bird fell, vasudha tale, to the surface of the earth. Vasudha, earth. The bird fell to the ground dead due to the Brahmana's curse. The Brahmana's mental powers were such that his mental curse could kill the bird. Now, how about your mental curses? And you do. I know. Everyone does. So when you're driving, our favorite example, you're driving down this Route 1, and that idiot cuts you off. Apadhyata. There is a mental curse. You know, it's a really good thing that you don't have this Brahmana's power. If you did, you'd see that poor fellow have a heart attack behind the wheel and fall over dead. Good thing you don't have that power, but don't think that your mental cursing has no effect. It has an effect. And I'll tell you, the one who is most affected by your mental curses is you. Right? What happens to your adrenaline and heart rate, and you get flushed and you get angry and all of this? You are the one who is most damaged or hurt by the mental curse. Of course, that anger comes out in other ways as well. The point is that if you have a value for ahimsa, not causing harm, then that has to be expressed not only with our bodies, by refraining from hurting people physically, it has to be expressed not only through our speech, by not uttering hurtful things, but ultimately that value for ahimsa has to be expressed in our thinking, so that when that person cuts you off, instead of cursing that person, you think, gosh, what an inconsiderate driver, which is a fact. Yes, inconsiderate, or maybe not inconsiderate, maybe not skillful. There are plenty of drivers who are not skillful. But if you make an observation that the driver was either not skillful or inconsiderate, it's an observation of a fact. There need not be the mental cursing to accompany it. Anyway, in the case of the Brahmana, due to the power of his mental curse, the balaka, the crane, fell to the ground dead. Balakam patitam drishtva, balakam patitam, gata sattvam achetanam, gata sattvam, karunyarabi santaptaha, karunyarabi paryashochatatam dvajaha, paryashochatatam. So our Brahmana, drishtva, having seen balakam, the bird, who was patitam, who had fallen to the ground, having seen the bird lying on the ground, the bird who was gata sattvam, lifeless. The sattva, the life force of the bird, gata, was gone. The bird was achetanam, unconscious, not just unconscious, really unconscious, dead. So having seen the dead bird lying on the ground, what did the Brahmana do? Look at the last line. Dvijaha, that twice born, that Brahmana, tam paryashochata. This is surprising. He paryashochata, it's a past tense verb, he grieved for the bird. Wait a minute. Why should this Brahmana grieve for the bird? He was, a few moments ago, he was so angry at the bird, he cursed it and killed it with his curse. Now, moments later, he is paryashochatatam. He is grieving for the bird. What a normal story, right? Have you ever done something harmful, and a moment later, what did you feel? Oh my God, what did I do? And that shows how anger perverts our behavior. And the prior verse said he was krodha abhibhuta, he was overcome by anger. Who's more powerful? You or anger? Too often, anger is more powerful. Anger, the term you've heard me use before, you get hijacked by anger. That's a nice expression. It's as though you're hijacked by anger, you are carried away by that anger, and made to do something you would not ordinarily do. So this Brahmana lived a pious life. He's conditioned not to cause harm to anyone, and here, because of his anger, he was overcome. He killed the bird. Moments later, the anger goes away, and what does he feel? Paryashochatatam. He's grieving now for the bird. Why? He is, in the line above that, he is abhisantaptaha karunyat. Karunyat, because of his natural compassion. Compassion for all living beings. This beautiful bird. is now lying dead on the ground before him. He's the cause of the bird's death. Therefore, karunyat, because of his compassion, he is abhisantaptaha, he's afflicted. We call this paschat-tapas. Another nice expression. Tapas is a kind of suffering that you feel later. Regret or remorse are the English words for this. So he feels regret, he feels remorse for his bad action. Of course, one thing the Brahmana knows, and we all know, you can't take it back. Once the action is done, you can't take it back. The consequences are an already existent fact. We have to deal with the consequences, and because of that, the Brahmana feels remorse. And what does he say? Akaryam kritavhanasmi, akaryam kritavha, ragadvesha balat kritaha, ragadvesha. Hityuktva bahusho vidwan, hityuktva bahusho. Gramam bhaikshaya samshritaha, gramam bhaikshaya. So he says, and he probably says this either out loud to no one in particular or mentally to himself. There's no one else around. But he says, akaryam kritavanasmi. Kritavanasmi, I did something, akaryam, that should never be done. I did something which is prohibited. I did something which is wrong. Why? Raga dvesha balat. Due to the power of my raga and dvesha, due to the power of my likes and dislikes. So he had a very strong dislike of having that bird dropping fall upon him. And because of that dvesha, what did he do? He made this mental curse and he killed the bird. He says, kritaha, this was done by me. This mental curse was done by me due to the power of my raga and dvesha. Iti uktva, having said this, bahushaha, again and again, not just once. So he is not just guilty, but he's obsessing on his guilt. He's caught up in his remorse. This vidwan, this very knowledgeable Brahmana, what did the Brahmana do? Gramham bhaikshaya samshritaha. He resorted to a gramam, a nearby village, bhaikshaya, for the sake of alms. He had finished his Vedic recitation, and the Brahmana supports himself by begging for alms. So he got up from the tree, he went to a nearby village, and begged for alms. What happened in the village? Dehi tihacha manovai, dehi tihacha tishtat yukta striya tataha, tishtet yukta striya bharta pravrishta sahasa, bharta pravrishta tasya bharata sattama, tasya Dehi iti yachamanaha. Yachamanaha, he was begging the Brahmana. How do the Brahmanas beg? Bhavati bhikshan dehi. This is a traditional greeting. When a Brahmana or a sannyasi arrives at your home, they don't knock on the door, and they certainly don't ring the non-existent doorbell. So they stand in the street. And by the way, there are some rules for this. And anyway, I won't bore you with all the rules. There are a lot of rules. They stand in the street and they announce themselves with these words. Bhavati, O lady, bhikshan, alms, dehi. please give. Please give alms, dehi. And that word dehi is quoted in the verse. Bhavati bhikshan dehi is the formula used for begging. Dehi iti, having uttered thus, having uttered not just dehi, but bhavati bhikshan dehi, having uttered this, yachamanaha, the Brahmana who was begging, what happened next? Tataha, then, striya, by the lady in the house, uktaha, he was addressed. And what was he told by the lady in the house? Tishta iti. Tishta, wait. Tishta, wait. Tishta, you have to break the words apart. Tishta iti uktaha. Then the words all run together. So he says, please give me alms. And the lady comes out and says, wait a minute. But this lady, Bharta pravishtaha sahasa yasyaha. Bharata Sattama, Markandeya addresses Yudhishthira, O great one. Tasyaha Bharta, her husband was pravrishtaha, was there in the house, and sahasa, he came into the house, and her attention was turned away from the begging Brahmana. Her attention was turned towards the husband. Then what happened? Now the story gets a little interesting. Brahmano vacha, kimidam bhavati tvam mam, kimidam bhavati. Tishtet yuktva varangane, tishtet yuktva uparodham kritavati, uparodham navisarjitavatyasi, navisarjitavat. Kimidam bhavati? What is this? What is this? He says, the Brahmana. Tvam mam tishta iti uktva varangane. Varangane, O lady. Tvam, you, uktva mam, having told me what? Tishta iti, having told me to wait. Then what happened? Uparodham kritavati. But you didn't serve me. Actually, I need to explain. I'm skipping a lot of verses. Notice this is verse 18. The prior verse was verses 8 and 9. So what happened in those 10 verses that I skipped? By the way, I'm skipping over these verses. If we saw every verse, the stories are told in such an elaborate way. If we were to see every single verse, I think you'd find it was a little much. So what we're seeing is a very condensed telling of the story. So what I skipped over was she said, wait a minute, and a minute was not exactly a minute. Why? She was busy taking care of her husband. So her husband suddenly entered, and she had to quickly take care of her husband. And you can imagine, typical housewife, she's really busy. She wants to take care of husband really quickly so she can respond to the Brahmana. But she has so many things that she has to do. She's getting food ready for him and all of this stuff. And he's really hungry, she's going to say later. So she's really busy, engaged in taking care of her husband's needs. As soon as she's done, she immediately goes out and greets the Brahmana again. And what is the Brahmana's response? Kimidam bhavati. What is this? Because you said, wait a minute. And I'm here. He didn't have a wristwatch, but I'm looking at neither do I have a wristwatch. The point is that she said, wait a minute, and she comes back 15 minutes later. Now, 15 minutes is not a terribly long time, but it's more than a minute. So this Brahmana, who apparently is a little irritated, and this expression, this shows his irritation. Kimidam, what is this? What is going on? Tvam, you, Tishta iti uktva, having told me to wait, uparodham kritavati, You failed to serve me. Uparodham. You literally refusal. You refused to bring me food when I first came. Na visarjavati asi, nor did you send me away. Now, this is the Brahmana's thinking. Is that you neither served me food, nor did you send me on my way so I could beg food from other places. You made me stand here waiting in the street, helplessly waiting for your return so that I could get some food. Our Brahmana is pretty upset. You neither served me, nor did you send me on my way so that I could get some other food. But why did this happen? Because this lady was busily engaged taking care of her husband, which is what she explains. Stri uvacha, kshantum harhasi me vipra, kshantum harhasi bharta me daivatam mahata, bharta me sachapi kshurito shrantaha, sachapi kshurito prapta shushrushito maya, prapta shushrushito kshantum arhasi me vipra. Vipra, O great Brahmana, me kshantum arhasi, you should forgive me. And she's using very formal, respected, very highly respecting language. She's speaking in a very polite way to this Brahmana. Please forgive me, O Brahmana. Bharta me daivatam mahata. Me bharta, my husband, mahat daivatam. My husband for me is a great God. My husband is my God. And here we have to expand this a little bit. Some of you know of the tradition that's called pativrata. Pativrata stri is a woman who is devoted to her husband. Now this is often misunderstood though. It's often misunderstood as a kind of servitude. You know, she's like the slave to her husband. Absolutely not. Let's understand this pativrata properly. And that is, in the Hindu tradition, one can have an Ishta Devata, right? A chosen form of God for your personal worship. Some have chosen Sri Krishna as Ishta Devata. Some have chosen Ganapati or Shiva as their Ishta Devata. This woman chose whom as her Ishta Devata? Her husband. And why not? We pray at an altar. Why? Because Ishvara has been invoked in each of these forms. That's what goes on during the rituals of consecration. Ishvara's presence is invoked in these forms, and therefore these forms become worshipful. Worshipable? Take your choice. So, tell me, you can only worship a form of Ishvara. Ishvara is present in these forms. Is Ishvara present in her husband or not? Absolutely. So her chosen form for worship is her pati, her husband. This is the essence of pativrata. Please notice, it's not servitude of a person. It is not servitude. Pativrata properly understood, and I know it's not always properly understood by husband or wife or others as well, but properly understood, this tradition of pativrata, this devotion to one's husband, is not devotion to the person, but devotion to Ishvara in the form of that person. What a difference, right? It's not to the person. Just like No, anyway, it's a big topic. Anyway, it's not to the person. When I told the story, I'll just tell it very, very briefly here. Shortly after my sannyasa diksha, in Rishikesh, I was given these robes. I'm walking down just moments after the ritual. The rituals went on for a couple of days. So the rituals are done. I'm walking through the ashram grounds, and one of the people in the ashram, they come and go to touch my feet. I jumped. Why did I jump? I made a mistake. Because I thought it was for me. Not for me. Just as you can worship Ishvara in the form of a deity on the altar, you can worship Ishvara in anyone who wears this cloth. It's not for the person. This has to be understood. These forms of respect are not for the person, but for Ishvara dwelling in the person, for Ishvara manifest as that person. So to be very clear about it, Hindus worship God. Do Hindus worship people? Do Hindus worship animals? Do Hindus worship statues? You know the answer to these questions. So therefore, when signs of reverence are shown towards a human being, let's be very clear, it's not the person or personality that is being revered, but rather Ishvara in the form of the person that is being revered. This is pativrata properly understood. So, she explains to the Brahmana, I was busy taking care of my... Well, she doesn't say... She says that next. But first of all, she says, Kshantum arhasi me vipra. O Brahmana, please excuse me. Bharta me daivatam mahat. My husband is my main god, my ishta devata, my chosen form for worship. Sahacha, and he, my husband, was kshuritaha shrantaha cha. My husband was hungry and tired. Kshuritaha, hungry, shrantaha, and tired. Therefore, praptaha sushrushitaha maya. Therefore, I was taking care of him. I was taking care of my husband because he was tired and hungry, and he is my ishta devata. She explains this to the wise Brahmana. How wise? Is he wise enough to understand her pativrata? Is he wise enough to understand that she's engaged in worship just as if she were engaged in worship at a temple? Suppose she's at a temple. Suppose she's doing puja. The Brahmana would very patiently wait. But she was engaged in taking care of her husband, and apparently the Brahmana didn't understood. Brahmano vacha, Brahmana nagari anso, Brahmana nagari, gari anste pati krataha, gari anste pati, Indro pyesham pranamate, Indro pyesham, Kempunar manusha bhuvi, Kempunar manusha. Te patihi kritaha, in the second line. The Brahmana addresses the lady and says, Te, for you, patihi kritaha, your husband becomes Gariyan. Your husband becomes most important. Your husband becomes most important, and Brahmanas are na Gariyan. They are less important. It says, for you, you make your husband so important. By making your husband so important, you are making Brahmanas unimportant. And then he really lays it on the line to her. He says, Indraha api, even Indra, king of the gods, pranamate esham, bows before Brahmanas. Even Indra, the king of the gods, bows before Brahmanas. Kim punaha manushaha. What to speak of people, bhuvi, on the world, if even Indra bows before Brahmanas, what to speak of people like you who have made your husband more important than a Brahmana? She was taking care of her husband. He left him on the street with his feelings hurt. Right? He got angry. He got upset. His pride was hurt. So this is clearly a prideful Brahmana. So what does she reply? Stri uvacha, Stri uvacha. Balaka hi tvaya dagdha, balaka hi tvaya roshat tadviditam mama, roshat sakrodha mohau tyajati, yah krodha mohau tam deva brahmanam viduhu, tam deva brahmanam. Very surprising. What does she say? She says, in the second line, viditamama. This is known by me. What do I know? Balaka hi. You know that crane in the tree? Balaka, that crane. Tvaya dagdha. You killed it. She said, I know that. It was dagdha literally means burnt. His mental curse was so powerful, it somehow burnt and killed that bird. Tvaya dagdha balaka. That bird was killed by you, roshat, out of anger. Tadviditam mama. I know this. This is known to me. Oh, wait a minute. She was inside her house, taking care of her husband. How could she possibly know that he killed this crane? So it looks like the Brahmana is not the only one who has some kind of special power. The Brahmana had that special power of being able to mentally curse and kill the bird. She also had some kind of special power of being able to know something that was not in her immediate vicinity. And you might say, well, how did this ordinary housewife come to get this special power? Wait a minute, she was no ordinary housewife. She was pativrata. She was a very devoted housewife. She was constantly engaged in puja. Let's go back to that pativrata just for a moment. Suppose you do puja. Some of you do puja at home. A few of you will do. How long does it take you? Maybe 15, 20 minutes, depending on how elaborate. Some of you will. By the way, even if you just light agarbatti, it takes 30 seconds. Wonderful. Absolutely wonderful. If you do something more elaborate, that's also wonderful. But even if you do something elaborate, it'll be over 15, 20 minutes, half an hour, then it's over. Why would you do that? Because you know you are blessed by the performance of that puja. It is worship of Ishvara. Worship of Ishvara is a tremendous punya karma, and you will be blessed by that punya karma. If you're blessed by 20 minutes of puja, how much more blessed would you be by 18 hours of puja? Huh? Are you going to sit in front of an altar for 18 hours and do this? Well, wait a minute. Put yourself in her shoes. Who is her Ishta Devata? Her husband? Suppose she's taking care of her husband all day long, not as a person, but as an embodiment of Ishvara. If that's the case, if she's taking care of her husband all day long, she's engaged in puja of Ishvara all day long. And for that intense day-long Ishvara, how much blessings would she receive from that daily puja? and some of the results of her blessings come in the form of some kind of prescience. She's able to know somehow that this Brahmana, with his mental curse, killed the bird. So not only does the Brahmana have a special power, she also has a special power. So she says, this is known to me. You killed that bird due to your anger. And then she's a little bold. She now proceeds to instruct the Brahmana. She says, Yaha, Yaha, one who tyajati, one who overcomes, one who gets rid of Krodha and Moha, one who overcomes anger and delusion, Tam Brahmanam. That is a real Brahmana. A real Brahmana is one who can control his anger. And this is not just what she says, but rather Devaha Viduhu. Even the gods know this. Even the gods know that a real Brahmana is one who controls his anger. Now, several chapters ago, we had a discussion about who is a Brahmana, and in that discussion, we made a distinction between Jati Brahmana and Guna Brahmana. You might be a Brahmana by birth, by virtue of the family you're born into, but according to scriptures, including Mahabharata, being merely born into a family merely makes you a Jati Brahmana, which is not important. What is important is to be a Guna Brahmana, to be a Brahmana in terms of guna, in terms of qualities. And so this Brahmana was certainly a Jati Brahmana, born into a Brahmana family, but apparently not a Guna Brahmana. And she is now going to proceed, having told him, I know you killed that bird. I know you have a problem with anger. And then she proceeds to teach him something about dealing with anger and about being a true Brahmana. That's what we'll see in the next class. And then she's just to give you a sneak preview. By the way, we'll finish this chapter in the next class and then proceed into the Vedantic teachings in our next class. But she teaches him briefly, and she says, you know what? I know someone who can teach you everything you need to know about Dharma. And this fellow lives in Mithila. And who is it? A Vyadha. This hunter who lives in Mithila. She sends him to Mithila to meet this Vyadha, and that's how the spiritual teachings proceed. We'll see that in our next class. Some announcements. Tomorrow, Sunday. On the first Sunday of each month, we have an advanced meditation session. We did not have that session last Sunday because of our anniversary, so we will have it tomorrow. Tomorrow at 6:15 will be our monthly advanced meditation session. You're all welcome, but if you are a skillful meditator, it'll be a little bit more effective for you. Yeah, 1 minute, because I need your advice on something. Some months ago, we installed a new flooring in the dining hall below us. We had received a sample from the vendor, and we had walked on the sample, and it felt quite good. The pebbles were very small in the sample. Turns out that the pebbles installed downstairs are not as small as in the sample. They're a little larger. I find that when I walk on that floor, it's a little bit uncomfortable. Now, here's a question. The question is, we can change our policy about not wearing shoes down there. Traditionally in an ashram, you don't wear your shoes in a dining hall. Anywhere in India, you don't wear your shoes in a dining hall. But some of you know, at Arsha Vidya Gurukulam in Poconos, you wear your shoes in the dining hall. Just to show that it's not a fixed rule. We don't regularly do pujas down there. Of course, we did last week for our anniversary. What we could do, depending on how we all feel about this, is we could change our policy and allow everyone to wear shoes into the dining hall. If on anniversary, we won't on those days, but otherwise we can wear our shoes. We can change our policy. So can I ask by a show of hands, how many of you would like us to change our policy to allow footwear to be used in a dining hall? How many of you would like that? How many of you would prefer that we maintain our current policy about not wearing? Okay. That's good. So we will then maintain our current policy. Okay. I did understand correctly, right? And I'm a little surprised. I thought it would be the other way around. Anyway, I'm delighted, and basically whatever works for us. And if your value is in the right place, so we'll continue our policy without change. All right. I want to thank all of you for making our anniversary celebration absolutely wonderful. The whole thing was delightful because all of you made it such, especially a lot of you who had volunteered to help. I know that some of you were so busy with your volunteer work that you weren't really able to enjoy your food. So, if you were too busy working to enjoy your food, or if you're a regular volunteer here, we would invite you to stay back after class today. We have a special volunteer appreciation lunch. How's that? So if you were too busy volunteering last week, or if you're a regular volunteer, please stay back afterwards. And please, in the dining hall, there'll be a volunteer appreciation lunch for you. Library will be open after class, and we'll conclude with our prayers. Om Sarve Bhavantu Sukhinaha Sarve Santu Niramayaha Sarve Bhadrani Pashyantu Ma Kaschid Dukkha Bhag Bhavet Asato Ma Sadgamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Tat Sat.